Hi friends, this is Sarah from Crafting and Relaxing, and today I'm going to share how I make one of my scrap cards because I'm not sure I've shared the concept enough and I'm still getting questions on it, and it is crazy easy. So what I do, and you've seen me do it, I save all the branding strips from my papers. I don't throw them away. If they're like this and I'm sick of the collection, I think this is a Paige Evans one, and this might be Pebbles, I can't remember. Different brands assemble them different ways, right? So if it's like that, I just shove it in the bag and keep it for later. If it was a giant 12 by 12, I keep the whole branding strip. Or if it was just, a lot of them, there's a 12-inch piece of paper, but only 6 inches of it has color on it. So I'll trim it down and shove it in the bag. So these are branding strips and scraps of paper that I have sitting around. And this is what's left over out of my Valentine's Day stuff. It's just kind of cluttering up my room. So I'm going to show you how I do it. I typically use a piece of basic cardstock. It could be a 65-pound scrap. You can use a piece of one of these, 65-pound. You can use a printed. There pretty much aren't any rules in scrap cards. I've never once made one and thought, that's so ugly, I'm throwing it out. This says, told you so on the back. I'm not going to use that. So I want to get this stuff used up. Either that or I have to put it away and it's the remains of my Valentine's kit. Sometimes that's how I pick my paper for the background. Sometimes it's just an ugly piece of paper that I didn't really want. I'm going to go 5 1/4 by 4 because I like to make it so that I can mat afterwards. So I mat and then I put it on a card base. Sometimes if I made it too big and I don't want to trim it down, then I'll just take it and put it on the card base. The project we're doing is using up scraps. There are no perfect rules. Well, you guys know there's pretty much never rules in my craft room. And you take stuff and you lay it down. A lot of them you'll see I do, oh, and if they have the hole in the middle like that, oh, that side's cute too. I just cut around it. I just take that hole and I trim it out. You could just leave it in there if you knew you were going to put ephemera over that spot. But right now at this moment when I'm making this card, I have no plan for how it's going to turn out. Because in my experience, they all turn out fine, so it doesn't matter. Does that make sense? And I would show you some of the ones I had sitting around. I already used what I thought was all the strips and branding strips and scraps of paper from Valentine's to make scrap cards and mailed those out. So I can't show you those anymore. Now what I do is I don't necessarily want to put two papers next to each other that are exactly the same. I use wet glue because I like that I can jiggle it a little bit after I lay it down. And I like to leave a little bit of it showing through. But at the same time, you'll notice my scrap cards, they're all different. They're all just, I'm looking at the size of the paper and going, oh, okay, that one's not long enough. That one's not long enough. Do I want some red in here? Sure. And I don't have any that are long enough. So I'm going to give it like the quilt look, which I think typically does make it look a little better. But if I have long enough strips, I don't do it because I'm lazy. See, you just come in right here, put some glue. You can, of course, use a tape runner or rolls of adhesive. Like I said, the art glitter glue it allows just a little bit of jiggle when I get it crooked or when I set it down and then realize it's not long enough. And I'm not going to put this red one right here because that one is. This one's a little big compared to the rest of the papers on here, but I don't think I care. It's also a little, oh, you know what? It has a damaged edge, so I am going to trim it down just a little. So these are just scraps that maybe in certain times, or if I was in a hurry, or maybe long ago when I didn't make as many cards and I was more scrapbooking, I might have just tossed out. And I don't worry about it if it's a tiny bit short. I can always trim that down, or sometimes if it's bigger, I take a piece of paper and I put it right there. Okay? And then we have a bit of this too. Oh, that one's a little rowdy. Let's not use that one. Oh, I like this one. Let's use this one. I'm going to cut this in half because I want more than one section of it. And when I say half, I just laid it on there and went, that looks good. And I have some white right here, so I'm going to put some white down here. My friends and I have experimented with these a little bit. It doesn't matter how ugly the back piece of paper is. I have a tendency, like if I am traveling, you know, when I pack those travel kits, I'll go through my scrap bins and I'll take what I consider to be like the ugliest papers that I would never use, like lime green or different leftover, you know, maybe you got a mixed pack of cardstock and it was terrible. And you're down, I mean, maybe it was good, but now you're down to like those terrible colors that you're like, what am I going to do with this? Use them for this layer on these cards. Because if you use papers like this that have a lot of color, like even that paper would look good. The mustard yellow, which is my least favorite color on here, so that's why I picked it, but sorry if you like it. One of my friends, we were doing a crop one night and she said, well, can you use a patterned paper for the back? And I said, well, I've never done it. But actually I'm doing it right now, huh? But she used a really bold striped black and white for the back and left a little gap like this. It was awesome. I've also done ones where I don't leave a gap at all. The reason I leave the gap, honestly, is it makes it more forgiving because the widths of the paper aren't all the same, right? And I just lay them all down and let them stick off and let the glue set and then set them aside to trim them. The only reason I might trim them earlier is sometimes I need the paper. Like I want that pattern, or heaven forbid I just ran out of scraps on the counter and I don't want to go look for any more. So I'll like trim off this piece right here so I can use it. But you would be surprised how well you will like the cards. I mean, they just turn out cute because it's papers that you bought and you're mixing and matching. And you do not have to, I meant to grab some and use some. You do not have to stick within one collection. Oh, here's a pinky orange kind of thing. You'll find that you buy similar papers. You buy patterns and color palettes that go together because that's what you like. So if you go through your scraps, they will match a lot of your other paper collections. Does that make sense? It's just, you know, mine might not match yours so well. Sometimes on the corner, I cut down strips really well. Sometimes I just go like this. They're really cute when they're trimmed. And then here, do I want this one? Sure. Okay, so there's one right there. I'm going to set that aside and make another one really quick just to show you something completely different. Because I have these papers handy. We're going to use the same paper. 5.5 by 4. Oops, did I go 5.5? 5.25. Perfect. Okay, then let's just make a completely different unplanned one. You'll also see I've thrown in a lot of cardstock solids, and that's because I like to give your eye the break sometimes, and I just didn't have the heart to throw them out. I was making all these winter cards, and there were so many of them. So here's an example, right? In my pile, there's going to be a ton of blue scraps, and I don't work too hard to find stuff that matches. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to take this. I like to usually start with a big piece to get it anchored. You can also start, like the last one, I just picked one, you could start at a corner. I'm going to just show you a completely different way. This one has a lot of what I call chunky pieces, and I don't necessarily want to trim them down. So sometimes I just take them and I go like this, and I start making a geometric pattern with them. Either way, you'll notice I'm using scraps. I'm having fun. These cards make ridiculously awesome backgrounds. So what I like to do sometimes is just make them and have them sitting in my stash for the moment when you need a card and you don't have one. And then you can put a piece of ephemera with the right sentiment or a big die or something like that right over the top. Sorry, I forgot to watch the camera. I hope you guys could see. But they just make it so that a card will come together really nicely. There's so much fun stuff in here. You can remember all the collections I've done all year. And again, there's lots of blue in my scraps. There might be a lot of pink in yours. And Ooh, I like this kind of blue-gray one. I think it'll tone this down a little. And then you'll see what it's like if you put a solid in here. And a lot of our paper collections, they have solids in them. So if you don't want to clutter up your scrap bag with solid paper, you don't have to. I like the purple, but it doesn't really go. Ooh, I'm going to use this. It was part of, I don't know, something I made that didn't quite work out. And I'm going to chop the end off because the end had more white and I wanted more color. So, I mean, look at this stuff. And I am making a point to grab totally different stuff just so you can see how it kind of comes together and works in the end. That's what I'm trying to show you. Okay, here's an example. I'm not going to worry about trimming that super narrow. Oh, that one's really crooked. We can tell up close. I'm going to take this piece of paper. I'm going to glue it on there. And then later, with my paper trimmer, when it's dry and set, I'll just trim it down. So I won't have to mess with it. Does that make sense? That other one is so crooked, you guys. But again, it's going to be like a quilt or the background layer. When we make alcohol inks or other stuff, we don't stop and worry about where the dots landed. I hope you don't. So if you think about it like just an artistic, fun background and like free yourself a little, you'll have a great time. Ooh, I like this one. It's kind of short. And I just go through and use, this one's really bad. It's jagged because I was talking. I just go through and use all of the, I want a little more of this gray, I think. I think that'll help tone us down. But I'm going to put it on the edge. I just go through and use papers that I like. Like, if you like the paper, then you'll like the end product. And these are all kind of a muted blue. Oh, I like this one too. At some point, I just have to make more because I find too many papers I like. And these are a great thing to do. They work really well for travel because they take a while and they don't take very many supplies. I think you've seen ones where I packed my bag of scraps, glue, and Dollar Tree scissors so I could get through TSA. And you can do this for a while. And for that, I just cut my 5 1/4 by 4 inch pieces before I go. Ooh, I like this one too. So this one is kind of like a Franken one. I do a lot where there are stripes at an angle or horizontal. I'll do some L's, which I kind of started out. That's what I thought I was going to do here, but it's not where the day took me, and that's okay. Will that fit in there? Yeah. Okay, so you can do these a couple different ways depending on what supplies you have. I'm going to zoom you out a little bit. There you go. You can take your scissors. So what I do is these are going to have glue on them and they may or may not be dry enough. So I don't want them to get into my other scraps. But when I'm doing this, I often reuse the big pieces out of here. So I cut moderately close. These scissors, you guys don't buy these scissors. These are Tonic, Big Blue. They loosen up and I have to tighten this screw like every week. I don't know what the deal is, but don't buy these scissors. Okay, so these scissors are crooked right now and hard to cut with, so it's going to be tricky to trim. If you're really on your game or you are just in a hurry, you can just go right in and cut in the first cut and get it. I kind of missed right there. It gets a little tricky because you've got papers of different thicknesses. Okay, look at that. You had your doubt. Admit it, you had your doubt. Oops, we still need to trim this side. Then what I'm going to do is, if I feel like it, we'll look at that one where the paper was too short. I know many of you are horrified because the back was so cute, but I'm never going to send you anything that says I told you so on it. But this is another way that I use up paper that I bought and wouldn't use. Okay, now, right there, there's a tiny little chip. If it kills you, this is the point where you pick up a chip off the counter that you cut, you stick it in there, and you just let it dry in there, straighten it out, and then you trim it off, okay? Because you're going to have a bunch of tiny pieces, see? You don't even have to worry about like cutting one down. You just stick it in there and let it dry. So there is that card front. They just turn out cute. They just do. You can't even do anything about it. Then this one I probably, if we weren't talking, I would probably let this set a little bit more, just because I don't always use the right amount of glue. This one seems to me a little crooked. So I'm trying to figure out, like the paper behind it looks crooked. We'll just try it. So I usually do let them sit longer, which is fine because I make a whole bunch of them in a row. And I usually don't have as many papers that go along the end like that. That's why I like to go across the front at an angle. It's really easy to line everything up. Okay, now I'm just going to trim this one because I just don't feel like the background is even square. Which, you know, gives it added. And it doesn't matter if it's the exact size when I mat it. They're all super flexible. Okay, look how cute. Super easy. Then what I would do is I would come in with pieces of ephemera right over the top. And what I do a lot on cards like this is they get a little busy. On these, I come in lots of times with something to ground it. So something to calm your eye a little, because otherwise your message is going to get lost a little. That's really bold. I'll probably use it because it's fine and I already have it. But typically I would use white, or I would put a piece of ribbon or something to let this piece stand out. The other way to do it would be to take this and like foam mount it up just to allow it. So this is a really busy card and you don't want your message to get lost in it. Does that make sense? So I hope you liked that. This one, I could, somewhere in here I have this poor thanks that got lost and no paper left behind. I have been known to take a giant die like that and just put it across the front because it's so big it's going to show anyway, even if you don't ground it. But then still, if you take a circle and you pop it in there or right there at the beginning, I don't know that I'd use black. Vellum might be nice. Something like that. It's going to help that message stand out and not get lost in it. There's no right or wrong. Totally whatever you want. I hope you enjoyed the scrap cards. Oops. Let's snip off this one. See? My scissors are a mess. They're like gappy. There we go. Okay. I hope you enjoyed this, and go through first. If you've been throwing out all your branding strips, stop. I keep mine in a big Ziploc bag. You could keep them in a little tray, whatever. I don't sort them by color. You'll notice there's no system whatsoever. If you wanted to sort them by color families, maybe even just hot and cool, then that would probably help a lot. But I don't do that. Have a great day. Bye-bye.